Hey guys, it's Jacob again, and this is the 10th video in my Studying JavaScript series. Just fix this a little bit. Maybe that's better. Yeah, so today I got about 5 hours done. I'm liking that I'm basically recording stuff after I do everything. That's the most natural way to do this for sure. So what did I look at today? Well, oh shit, that might be loud. Let's see. So the first thing. Okay, so I read mostly source code today. So I talked about how yesterday I did a bunch of documentation. That was great. Doing documentation is a really smart thing to do in intervals over time, right? Mostly as a supplementary nutritional thing, while you're just consuming a boatload of source code. And the reason it works out this way is as you read source code, you encounter patterns, and the ones that are the most prevalent, ubiquitous, and significant, you remember just naturally because you encounter them the most. And then when you go back to documentation, you remember the same patterns and you link the patterns to a more high resolution conceptual definition of what those mean. And when you do this iteratively over time in spaced intervals, you eventually become extremely fluent with what you're looking at, and you don't process it in the way that most people process code, which is like linearly and sequentially, where they have to basically parse what's going on and logically combine it into some sort of like operation and outcome. But once you get fluent enough, you just look at what happens, and in a fraction of the time, you understand fundamentally what is going on. And so yeah, looking at documentation is great while you're mostly reading source code. Today, I mostly read source code. But there is another type of technique that everyone I know, and basically everyone does this, and it's Googling, right? It's not looking through documentation, it's not reading source code, it's kind of doing a very, very specific high resolution query on the internet, known as Googling. And this can be really good for differentiating between close but hard to differentiate between concepts. A good example of this is today I googled exports dot and then module dot exports. So I see this pattern a lot in JavaScript. People export stuff, but the way they export stuff is different. Sometimes they'll use just exports dot function whatever object constant. Other times what they'll do is they'll do module dot exports. And so I looked that up through Google, and I'm not going to tell you the answer to these things, but I am going to I'm not interested in telling you specific tidbits of information, right? That's like a fact. That's something that you uncover. It's not important. What's important is understanding how to uncover any sort of abstract patterns, meaning and deeper meaning, and it just keeps going, right? And so that's at least the way that I approach these things in learning in general. So yeah, I did a little bit of Googling here and there. I made a mental note. I did my little CSS thing. So I'm committed to learning CSS really well too. And I'm feeling better about it, better and better. I actually think it's going to be really easy, comparatively speaking, to JavaScript, because I finally figured out how to do it in my mind, and it's totally reconciled. And I'll reiterate what that strategy is. It's very simple. There are these things called CSS properties. Those are like 99% of what CSS is. There are some concepts about CSS, but I'm not going to focus on the concepts. I will eventually get there. but I'm going to just focus on these properties. What you do with a property is you give it a value, and that's basically it. And when you combine these properties with different values that they can be assigned, and then you take this entire little cluster of information of properties and values and attach it to basically a string which you can reference in the DOM, which you attach to an HTML element, and it will render it in a very specific way through the browsers, understanding of CSS and HTML. Okay, so like, it's super simple in terms of that, and all you need to do is understand these properties and the values you set them to. And it's really natural when you just read source code and it's real, so it has CSS, which, by the way, there's like 5 or 6 different ways to actually accomplish CSS, though that I've encountered. Some is using JavaScript, some is using just raw CSS, some is using, a combination of both. But anyways, the other thing you can do, which I have, and I'm going to do, is so you look at the properties, then what you do is kind of just go a little bit deeper into each property and maybe look at an example of it. And obviously this will evolve over time, and I'll start looking at like what are actual concepts like the box model or the flex blah blah blah, but really it doesn't matter. The most important thing is its properties, its values, communicates to the browser, attaches to an HTML element, referenced by a string. That's what's most important. There are some other like patterns about trying to be able to like reuse stuff for CSS, but none of that is really necessary. If it might make you more efficient, but it's not actually that relevant. It's very easy to get bogged down in complexity that is kind of just there after you already feel really comfortable with something, for the sake of making writing things faster, right? It's actually a really important concept. There's 2 main things that humans do. There's read and there's write. And you'll notice that programming languages are oftentimes optimized for both simultaneously. But one thing you notice is that sometimes patterns that are good for writing are anti-patterns for reading. And sometimes patterns that are good for reading are anti-patterns for writing. And so there's this real like push and pull between these things. And one of the ways I like to think about it is that something is only hard to read if you're not familiar with it and prepared to read it. So that can be improved over time. Humans can just get more and more skilled at reading something if they're committed to it, but it can be harder to read with less commitment to it, right? On the other side, writing can never be improved past a certain point if the language doesn't permit it. And so I often think about it's more important to be able to write code efficiently than to be able to read code. And that's what you see in the real world. People are writing code to do stuff. They open source it, and you know how many people don't read source code that's free and available? Because they just don't fucking understand it, right? It's too hard to read. But in some ways, this is just a intractable problem. It's a complicated thing what the code is doing, and there's going to be no way to express it in a way that is simple enough to a reader that is just not familiar enough with the deep amount of concepts involved, the large amount of concepts, right? And so yeah, I mean, there's just kind of like a little tangent that I think about sometimes. One thing that's cool is I found this one guy's blog today, and it looks like he's really proficient with CSS. So I'm probably going to read through some of his stuff. I might just he's got like 40 blog articles or so. I might just crunch through all of them. And eventually I might like reference him. It kind of reminds me of myself, but just like maybe much more further along in some ways and probably completely different in other ways, right? That's what's so cool about this journey, right? About like computer scientists that are like-minded like me. They become like creative behemoths eventually. And, they're really interested in becoming as good as they can, and they like using it and creating stuff, and they just end up having this stuff on the internet that's like so unique, you know. I'm not talking about like a Shopify, I paid $200 a year to have like some buttons that people can buy stuff with, you know, or a Wix. There's all these website clone builders they have a lot of functionality, but that's not really what the internet, in some ways that's what a pragmatic form of the internet is in. It's just, let's hook stuff up so transactions can occur. And like, but no, there's like, let's learn how to do things and how stuff actually works. And I mean, I don't really have any problem with Shopify or Wix. I mean, they're businesses that are solving a very specific problem, which is the deep need for sites to be up and the huge barrier of entry to the average person, right? It's just not that easy to set up a custom site. Like, what are you going to learn how to use the cloud and a language and like programs to host it and then like deploy it on a VM? And there's like 57 different, there's like thousands of things you have to know before you can actually deploy like a custom thing. You know, and there's only so much you can accomplish by like using shortcuts. Yeah. So I guess the other thing is I added two new libraries to my JavaScript study source code. I've got a bunch of libraries now, but these ones, I guess they're not libraries, they're projects, right? These ones are really pretty significant. If you're familiar with DevOps and Docker, you're probably going to know about these, but one is called Grafana and one is called Portainer. And they're both Golang backends that talk to Docker or Kubernetes or Docker swarms. And then they present all the data in a front-end GUI that you can like do lots of cool different things with. I mean, it's pretty awesome. What's interesting is, you know, I'll say this again. Well, maybe I haven't said this, but I have said this. I'm studying JavaScript. It gets a little bit mishmashed because like I'm specializing probably in React, but I'm not studying React, right? I see a lot of React, and I did include a lot of React, but it's important that I understand that like that is just one permutation of JavaScript. There are many, many different ways to use JavaScript that don't use React at all to do front-end solutions. You know, I'm not just talking about Node where React would have no real place anyways. So I guess an interesting thing to ask me. Those are going to be great libraries to read. I just started them, but they're going to be great. A good question I think I might answer is, what am I thinking when I'm reading source code? You know, like what do you think about? Do you sit down and when you read a line, do you like read it and then what do you think? What do you think afterwards? So for me, most of the time, because of the way that I'm reading with like a fixed scrolling rate, I don't have time to necessarily process exactly what a line does. And so probably, depending on how simple, recognizable, and good I am at reading. So like simple and recognizable the JavaScript code is, which when you really get down to it, is just a personal thing. It's personal to me. What is most recognizable to me, right? So, but anyways, what I'm trying to say is like, as I get better, I can process things a lot faster. But right now, I drop a whole lot of things because they happen too fast, and I can't comprehend them exactly. I might be able to recognize some patterns, but not the entire pattern, right? I almost never can grasp the entire pattern, and that is by design, honestly, because um, I just don't think that there's that much value in going so deep into some function that you know exactly what it's doing. Like, you will eventually have that level of clarity just by glancing. Like, I can do that with a lot of stuff because I've read so much code now, but I'm not sitting there and like parsing it, pulling it apart bit by bit, sequentially adding up what it does. That's just, I think, an inefficient way to read code and the wrong thing to practice. Instead, you should practice just imprints, impression, and then initial reaction. And eventually, as you train this like intuition, it becomes extremely accurate, and you don't have to do all of this like slow recognition stuff, which allows you to actually, you know, get to the big leagues, I would say. Um, but yeah, so what's going through my mind? Most of the time, nothing. Sometimes I'll think different like thoughts to kind of like keep me on track. Like, I'll be like, look at this. I'll think in my I have this one thing that I say in my mind, which is like defer to it's pretty weird, but I say defer to quantum synthesis. What it really means to me is just look at this, don't like try and figure it out. Just let it go and let your subconscious and let your mind figure out what it is. This is at the heart of real human learning and pattern recognition. You don't figure stuff out by consciously looking at it. You figure stuff out by encountering it over and over and over again and building up like a huge understanding of it through those permutations, right? Um, some of the other things I think of, though, are I'll look at a pattern and I'll just be like, what is this? Sometimes I'll do that for like a couple minutes. I don't really have like a script. I'm not like forcing myself to do something, but my mind kind of goes in these little zigzags sometimes where it's like, all right. And it's useful. It's useful to ask that question until it becomes like a routine again and it's not actually triggering anything consciously in your mind. It's just like, in the end, all you have to do, reading code and understanding it, is like, at least for me, a purely visual pattern type of thing. Like, it's not like the same as an English sentence at all. Like, real source code is not like that at all. It's patterns of something else. Eventually, you could distill it down to something like that, which is what like blog writers do, and some other people. Documentation to some extent does that. But there are patterns within apps that never get that treatment, right? No one's ever sat down and like explained what it is that's actually happening. But I might try and do that. It'll take a lot longer because I'm only really like, it sounds, I don't know, maybe, I don't know how this would sound to people. To me, it's not that much, but like, I'm only 67 hours into studying JavaScript, which is like pretty large considering I've really only been tracking for 10 days. So that's like 6.7 hours on average a day. Again, my hours are 45 minutes on, 15 minutes off. Sometimes it's just a longer period of time off, but when I come back, I try and stay focused for at least 45 minutes. Sometimes I can't even do that. But other times I can do like even 90 minutes or like even like 135 minutes, which is just 45 times 3. So anyways, yeah, been a pretty good day. I'm feeling like, I would say super optimistic. Whoopsies. Super optimistic. I mean, I know it's gonna work out. Yeah, I don't know why I have so much confidence about it, but it's like, I just kind of, it's how you develop fluency. It's going to be so much fun, dude. I'm going to be able to make websites so quickly with such high quality. I mean, I guess that's sort of the goal. For me, it's really to be able to do that. I don't want to be like bumbling around. I want to be precise. I want to know what I'm doing, know a lot of different ways to get there, crunch it out, make very few mistakes, understand how to, like, you know, and I want to be able to, I'm really interested in building the greatest comprehension that I can of these things, right? A deeper comprehension. If you guys know about machine learning, it's basically like what I'm doing is basically how the best machine learning algorithms become so effective at what they do. They consume a huge amount of data, which is permutations or source code, and they recognize patterns inside of it, and they basically utilize this to, or there's the alternative style of machine learning, which is where they generate their own permutations by playing against themselves. And I still think that that's very similar to just basically reading source code, because you're not playing against yourself, but it's basically, maybe it's not, I don't know. At the heart of it is, this is why it's similar, okay? At the heart of both of those different things is a statistical model just taking a new permutation and putting it in a huge dimensional cluster space so that it can represent all sorts of complex groups. And in that way, it doesn't matter if it's getting new information through playing against itself or getting new information from just an external feed. The external feed might as well be the other thing it's playing against, which is a clone of itself, right? So it's mostly just about consuming information that's new, integrating it into the model that's old and growing forever, and then becoming better at the entire function that you optimize on, which might just be simply recognizing, right? That's basically what comprehension is. It's just the act of recognizing and understanding something. I can't comprehend Chinese, right? If I wanted to, I would do it the way that I'm doing JavaScript. I'd do it the same way. It might be harder with Chinese, but I still think, it'd take a long time to do it. But anyways, so this has been pretty good. I think I'm going to definitely get some hours tomorrow in, and I'm going to try and get hours in on Friday, but I have something pretty early after work, so it's going to be kind of tricky. If I can, I have to do it early. So we'll see, but Saturday I'll definitely try and hit Sunday is going to be my 12-hour try again, but Saturday I'll probably aim for 8 or 9 or 10 hours, between 6 and 10, and that'll be pretty cool. And I'll close out this week pretty strong, and eventually I'll get back to making some apps, but I'm really enjoying and feel that this exercise is super useful, so I'm just going to keep doing this for a while. There's no sense in just rehashing your same. This is what I hate. This is what I hate about some of the advice people give you, is just work on apps and stuff like that. What do you mean? It's not hard to make things with design patterns and coding patterns that but that's not going to make you better at making things. That's just going to make you repeat what you already know indefinitely. And your comprehension might not actually improve that much despite building more things. That's what my experience was with JavaScript, because I've used it for years now to make different UIs for a lot of my projects, and I've never actually built a strong comprehension of it. I've been able to manipulate it in, I would call, infantile ways, ways that I understand and get it to work. And I've gotten more sophisticated over time, but it's just never been the right approach, right? And you could do that for a lifetime. You could just build new stuff and like kind of recycle your old stupid bullshit patterns forever, instead of just jumping to high quality examples of people doing like the cutting edge, getting the most out of the language for what they're trying to do, right? So with that said, I've talked enough. These are kind of getting longer. I have a lot to say. I enjoy talking. Um, but yeah, so leave a comment below if you have something to say. Like and subscribe so that the channel can grow, so that the algorithm can work. And check out my blog if you want to, get a little bit of a deeper exposure to what I'm about. I'm going to try and keep adding articles and stuff to it, but again, I'm not interested in writing rinse and repeat verbatim. Like, I don't want to do shallow. I want to create something unique in the universe that's worth creating, worth reading, right? I don't want to waste people's time. I don't want to create another tutorial on like how basic stuff works. I want to kind of illuminate something new. I'm definitely sure there's room for that. So anyways, thanks, peace, take care of yourself, have a good day.